So hi and welcome to the Data Explorers Market Update with me, Will Duff Gordon. So there's a bit of a cold snap going on in the UK and in Europe at the moment. Before you all start to laugh too much in the States, we tend to fret about these things. We're not as prepared. People don't tend to have 4x4 trucks with winches and snow plows on them because snow isn't sort of quite as common as it is in certain parts of America. So we all, of course, panic. And we thought, let's have a look at whether or not kind of investors are ready, or it's catching investors out in terms of how they're positioned in the major power companies and those companies who will be seeing an upsurge in demand if we have colder weather earlier this year and another hard winter. So first of all, let's look at grit. I remember the last winter, great panics. We ran out of grit. Very clever we are in the UK. And this year, once bitten, twice shy. Well, except that it's come rather early and lots of local councils are short of grit again. There's a company in Germany called K&S, sorry if I've mispronounced it. It's got a very sort of innocuous name, but they supply grit, also have capabilities in potash and fertilizer, so they look like in a pretty sweet spot. And unsurprisingly, institutional ownership from those funds who lend their stock have a 52-week high level of shares in K&S, so they think that K&S is going to be fine. I would tend to agree with them. Let's look at EDF, Electricité de France, because interesting article in Bloomberg recently saying that EDF their output is not quite as great as they thought it might be this year, given some slowdowns due to some strikes, and also because they're swapping out their fossil fuel powered power stations with nuclear reactors, of which they've got 49 working now. Investors aren't really sure what to do with EDF. No real change in short interest, it's low, no real change in institutional ownership. But given that EDF is going to be a net importer of electricity between November and January, that takes me to look at Gazprom, the big provider of oil and electricity to Europe, Russia's great powerhouse. How are investors positioned there? Well, Gazprom is a market data nightmare. So many issues, so many CDOs, ISINs, tickers, it's very hard to see. But I think I've detected that in the group company, the ADR for the parent, Gazprom itself. There's interestingly an increase in short interest there, with a spike in June and a spike just recently. Okay, it's not big. It's about 1% of the shares in issue and about 14% of the supply, but it's a noteworthy rise. I mean, I would have thought Gazprom is well positioned. I think there are some changes in Russia's tax structure towards energy companies, which could be putting a bit of a question mark over their future. If you then look at their subsidiary that I think is the arm that exports the oil and gas, Gazpromneft, they have an ADR trading in America as well. And again, recent spike in short interest in that to 15% of supply. People did borrow the shares after the shares had fallen in half in the summer, a bit too late, but they're just going back in again. So what's going on with Gazprom? In Germany, no such any worries on E.ON's front in terms of they haven't reported, for instance, that they are running at below capacity for the needs. But for a stock that never gets borrowed or shorted, there has been an interesting pickup to about 3.7% of its shares borrowed, which is you never really see. So that's interesting in E.ON. Finally, let's come right back to the UK. Drax, which is a sort of an independent coal-fired power station that floated about 3 years ago. That was shorted to about 7% of the company, and that's been coming down very rapidly recently to about 5.5%, probably just in the nick of time as this cold snap comes in and it starts to snow in the north of England. That's a wrap from me. There is a report at dataexplorers.com/news.